I have handled more estates than I can name, and I have learned that houses hold things the people inside them never said aloud. Harwick was no different, except that what it held had been waiting longer than most, sealed in a cream envelope at the back of the second drawer of the old man's writing desk, filed between a gas receipt and a set of obsolete insurance forms, as if it were nothing, as if it had always been nothing. I found it on the 14th of March, on a cold Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after Edmund Vane died. Edmund Vane, composer, professor, 78 years old at the end, and a man I had known in the professional sense for almost 30 years. Without ever truly knowing it all, I had filed his tax returns. I had witnessed his will. I had walked through that music room a dozen times and watched him sit at the Bosendorfer with his back to the window and his eyes somewhere beyond the garden, playing things he never finished, stopping mid-phrase as though the phrase had given him news he wasn't ready for. I had learned not to speak when he played. The envelope had his daughter's name on the front, Miriam. Single word, his own handwriting, slightly unsteady in the way that men's handwriting becomes unsteady when what they are writing costs them something. No address, no stamp, never posted. The seal was still intact, and I stood there for a long moment in the slant light of that late afternoon, holding it, doing the arithmetic in my head with a sinking feeling. Miriam had left Harwick 30 years ago. She had been 22 then, and there had been a silence between them that neither had thought to end before it became permanent. Edmund had never mentioned her name to me, not once, in 3 decades of professional dealings. I had assumed they had made their peace with the distance. The envelope told me otherwise. I did not open it. That was not my place. What I did was ring the estate archivist, a young woman named Irina Voss, 28 years old, who had come to catalog the musical papers, and ask her to come back to the house. I told her there was something she needed to see. Irina was not what you expected when you expected a music archivist. She was quiet in the way that archivists are quiet, a stillness that looked like patience, but was in fact a very concentrated form of attention. She wore her dark hair pulled back and she had ink on her left hand most mornings, and she moved through Edmund's papers as though they were a language she was in the middle of learning. I liked her. She reminded me of what thoroughness looks like when it has not been worn down into procedure. She opened the envelope at Edmund's writing desk, with the desk lamp on and the rest of the house dark. I sat in the chair by the window and watched her read. The letter was 2 pages. She read them without speaking. Then she turned to the 3rd page, which was not a page, but a folded sheet of music manuscript paper, covered on both sides in Edmund's small neat notation, each bar a precise thing, the whole piece handwritten in pencil that had held its mark for 30 years. At the top of the manuscript in his hand, for M. Irina did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Has she seen this?" "No." "Does she know it exists?" "No." Irina looked at the manuscript for another moment. She looked the way people look when something has landed on them that they weren't prepared to carry but can tell immediately they will. "I can learn this," she said. "Give me 2 weeks. We planned a small closing gathering for the house. The sort of thing estates warrant. A last evening in the rooms before the keys change hands. 30 guests, perhaps. Edmund's former colleagues from the conservatory, a few of his students, neighbors who had watched the lights in the music room window for years without understanding them. And I wrote to Miriam. I found her through a forwarding address in the estate correspondence, a single letter from 6 years ago, signed in her hand. I wrote and told her that her father had left something for her, that I could not explain it in a letter, that I thought she should come to the house one last time. I did not tell her what. I did not know how. She wrote back 3 days before the gathering. She said she would come. She said she wasn't sure why. I recognized her immediately when she came through the door. She was 62 now, and she had her father's way of holding herself. Straight, a little wary, the posture of someone who has learned that rooms sometimes rearrange themselves without warning. She didn't speak to anyone. She found a chair at the back of the music room and sat down and folded her coat in her lap, and I watched her look at the Bosendorfer. Still in its place, the old sheet removed now, the lid up, and something moved across her face that I cannot name precisely. Recognition, perhaps. The kind that hurts. I had asked Irina to play at 9 o'clock, after the wine and the talking had run their natural course. She came in quietly, as she did everything, and sat at the piano without introduction. I had told the room only that she was the archivist, that she had found something in the papers, and that she would like to play for us. The room settled. Candles on the mantel, the windows dark. 40 years of Edmund Vane in the walls of that room, in the slight dip of the piano bench, in the lamp that had burned in that spot since before Miriam had left. Irina placed her hands on the keys and was still for a moment. Then she began. What she played first was Schumann, Träumerei, the seventh piece of the Kinderscene. Dreaming, 7 minutes long in its natural telling, though Irina's pacing was slower than that. Each phrase given room to mean something before it was released. It is not a complicated piece in the technical sense. It is a piece about what memory sounds like when memory is not painful. The simple suspended quality of a thing remembered from childhood when childhood itself was a gentle place. I had heard it many times. I had not heard it the way she played it. I heard Miriam before I saw her, a small sound. Not crying, something just before crying. I turned and looked, and she had her hand pressed flat against her sternum, fingers splayed, as if she were holding something in place. Her eyes were open. Her eyes were absolutely open, and she was somewhere else entirely. I understood then. The letter had told Irina something I had not seen. Edmund had written in that letter, I learned this only later, when Irina showed it to me, that Träumerei was the piece he had taught Miriam at 7 years old, that it was the first music she had ever played through to the end without stopping, that he had stood behind her at this piano, in this room, with his hand on her shoulder, and she had played it straight through while the afternoon light moved across the garden, and he had thought, she has it, the gift, and he had never told her. He had assumed she would come to know it on her own. He had assumed there was time, 30 years, a sealed envelope, a man who could say things in music that he could not say in a room. Irina played Träumerei to its final bar. Then she did not stop. The last chord dissolved, not into silence, but into something else. A single note, repeated, softer, lower, the right hand moving into a pattern that was no longer Schumann. The key shifted, almost imperceptibly at first, and then the left hand arrived with a phrase that was unmistakably Edmund Vane's own. His harmonic language, his signature movement from minor into something that was neither major nor minor, but floated between them, the way his music always did, the way grief floats between an ending and whatever comes after an ending. Several people in the room straightened, without knowing they had done it. One of Edmund's former colleagues, a tall man with white hair who had known him for 40 years, turned to the person beside him and said nothing, then turned back. I watched Miriam. The moment she heard it, she knew. I am sure of that. She knew the way you know your own father's voice in a crowd before you have located him. By something that lives deeper than recognition, below thought, in the place where the body keeps its oldest knowledge. Her lips parted slightly. Her hand was still pressed against her sternum. Her eyes filled, and she did not try to stop them. The piece was 11 minutes long. Irina played every bar. It was not a simple thing. There were passages in the second movement that were technically demanding in the way that only becomes apparent when you are inside them. A right-hand melody that moved through 4 key changes in the space of 8 bars, always arriving, always finding its way back. There were passages that were quiet to the point of almost disappearing, single notes suspended in the silence between them, the music learning to breathe, and there was a moment near the end, 4 bars before the final movement, where the Schumann returned, briefly, like a quotation, like a memory surfacing inside a larger memory, and several people in the room exhaled at the same moment without coordinating it. Irina played the final chord and let it go slowly, the way that final chords go when the music has been building to them honestly. The sound diminished. The room was still. Outside, somewhere in the dark garden, a sound, a branch, or the wind, but inside, nothing. No one moved. I am 71 years old. I have sat in many rooms at the end of many evenings and felt the particular quality of quiet that follows something that has been done well. This was not that. This was something harder to name. The room was holding its breath, not because it was impressed, but because it had been changed. And it knew that, and it was not yet certain what to do with the knowledge. Irina did not look at the room. She reached into the small leather portfolio beside the bench. She removed 2 pages, and she read, in a voice that was steady and quiet, and did not try to do anything more than carry the words. I have written you a piece of music, because I have never been able to say to your face what I have always known, which is that you were the most gifted person who ever sat at this piano. I should have told you that 30 years ago. I should have told you every time I thought it, which was often. The music was always in you. It was there at 7 years old when you played Träumerei, through for the first time without stopping. And I stood behind you and felt something I did not have the language for then, though I have it now. It was not pride, it was recognition. I knew what you were, and I was afraid to say it, and by the time I understood the cost of that silence, the distance had become its own kind of habit. I do not ask you to forgive a silence I cannot explain. I only want you to know that the peace enclosed is yours. It was always. It is everything I should have said. Miriam had her eyes closed. The room was very still. She sat that way for a long time, her coat folded in her lap, both hands resting now at her sides, palms open. And then very slowly she brought one hand up to her face, and she held it there, and she made no sound at all. I do not know what she forgave that night, or whether forgiveness is the right word for what happens when something that has been sealed for 30 years is finally opened. I know that she stayed until the house was nearly empty, and that at the end of the evening she went to the piano and stood beside it for a moment, with her hand on the lid. I know that she found Irina in the hallway, and they stood together for a long time without speaking, and then Miriam said something I could not hear, and Irina nodded. I know that Miriam took the letter with her when she left, and the manuscript. She carried them against her chest, with both arms, as though they were something fragile, or something she had not expected to be given, or something she had been waiting for, without knowing she was waiting. The house closed the following morning. I have filed many estates, and I have learned that houses hold things. Harwick held a letter for 30 years, and a piece of music, and the shape of a father's voice in the only language he knew how to use honestly. And it held them long enough for the right pair of hands to find them and play them into the room where they had always been meant to arrive. I am not a sentimental man, but I have not forgotten that evening, and I do not expect I will.